Kelly. I'm going to be the MC today. I'm glad that the weather isn't as nice as it was yesterday, so everyone feels like coming inside and having a bit of cosy democracy chat. I just want to acknowledge, of course, that we are on unceded land, the lands of the Jara people here on Dja Dja Wurrung country. At the moment, it's Dum and Bundjul time. I'm not sure if people know, but there's 6 seasons in the Dja Dja Wurrung calendar, and they're all up on the Mount Alexander Shire Council site. The Mount Alexander Shire Council, and a council in this town, has been here since the 1850s, so roughly 180 years. But Jara people have governed, come together, debated, been engaged in diplomacy for millennia on these lands. And I think we probably know that the mechanisms of Jara governance and diplomacy and decision making and looking after country are quite different from how we do it now. And in acknowledging that difference, I also acknowledge that there's so much to learn. So I pay my deep respects to elders past and present, and for those that have cared for this land for time immemorial. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you to our 8 we have some people who've been elected uncontested and some who are contesting in this election. People know there's toilets in the front, fire exits to the side and at the front of the building. We're here for a couple of hours, so if you need to come and go and grab a drink, go to the bathroom, please feel free. We're going to try and keep moving really quickly. And I just wanted to say before we begin that we've got a zero heckling policy today. We've got some ushers in vests, as well as coming to let you know that you might want to pipe down if you are shouting out. They've got some clipboards, so if people want to leave any comments or questions, we'll make sure that they go to our candidates. There's also some notes boards at the front desk. And yeah, you can feel free to clap if you like, but we're going to really try and keep things moving. This event is also being filmed and live streamed. And so if there's anyone who doesn't want to be on camera, again, just let some of our ushers know. I can see Laurie and Rowan, and we've got some other folks in the foyer. And we're going to hear some of a portion of questions that have been put forward by 12 community groups today. Just before I introduce the groups and get everyone to introduce themselves, I just wanted to quickly let you know a bit about me. My name's Alex, I'm a filmmaker, and I do a fair bit of emceeing and public speaking around town, and that's because I'm very passionate about people power and about public conversations, so I'm really honoured to be here today. I also just want to acknowledge that no one in any community is ever neutral, and in fact we often wear many hats. So I know there's people here who've been part of some of the groups that have put questions together. There's a lot of people here who volunteered on organising today. There's people that are supporting some of the candidates. And I just want to declare that my bias is for progressive ideas and transformative change. And I just reserve my right. I'm not going to get into debates with anyone, but I do reserve my right to respond if anything emerges either from the floor or from the candidates that might make others in the space feel unsafe, because we really want today to be a really respectful and engaged day. So, everyone who's here, as well as those who are not here, have received a survey by a bunch. That's my 1 minute warning. This is Mira. So I've got a minute, and everyone's had a survey already. Today, not everyone's going to respond to every single question. I'm going to take hands for people that want to respond, invite 2 to 3 responses. Mira's going to keep time, giving people a 1 minute warning and a bell when we're at time, and we're going to keep moving. What's incredible about today and the participation of so many community groups is that these questions come from hundreds of people. And as I said, it's been recorded, people can catch up later, but also the full responses from all the candidates will be on the website. So that's meetthecandidates.mountalexander.com.au. And the groups are Castlemaine Commons, Castlemaine Community House, Castlemaine Pride, Castlemaine Safe Space, Castlemaine School Strike for Climate, Central Victorian Climate Action, Free Palestine Central Vic, Mount Alexander Shire Accommodation and Respite Group, Mount Alexander Shire Disability Advocacy Group, My Home Network, Rural Australians for Refugees and People in the Shire. Right, yeah, I'll introduce them again. So now we're going to hear from each of the candidates. We'll just start down the end and we'll go through. You've each got 2 minutes to introduce yourselves. Mira will let you know when you're at 1 minute and the bell when you're at 2 and time's done. So thank you.
1 for the invitation. 2, most people probably know me, Bill Maltby. I've just finished the term of the Castlemaine ward, which included Campbell's Creek, and now I've renominated for Campbell's Creek because that's the area where I actually live and know very well. It's my second time as a councillor. In 1984, when I was 24, I was elected to the city of Castlemaine and served about 10 years. My interest in representing the community is that Castlemaine and District, Shire, is a very good local area. We're a very diverse population, one that deserves the respect of everybody, and local government is there to provide services like aged care and roads and rates, rubbish collection, etc. So I'll put my hand up again. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Max. Quickly, my background. 50 years in a romance with local government, and it's still going on. Okay, for those who don't know, I'm qualified as a health and building surveyor and also went to deputy mayor. Now, I came here a long time ago. I was brought in by the Shire of Bullet Building Department, and the previous CEO is still here on the Audit and Risk Committee. Then I was brought in to rescue significant historical buildings in both the Macedon Ranges Shire and Mount Alexander Shire, both privately and through a 10-year participation on the Mount Alexander Heritage Advisory Board. A quick anecdote. Where you're sitting now, the roof above, not the ceiling, the roof above is heritage, the only one of its kind in the large scale in Victoria, but it has been covered over. It was done under my reign. Currently, I'm teaching and promoting local government through an endorsed councillor PEG initiative, which is why I have this t-shirt, and I volunteer along existing staff and councillors. I have supported every group that's here today and those that aren't here as well in my term, and I have a lot of street cred and public opinion, and I've demonstrated my community skills and involvement with community issues, e.g. the 50 kilometres an hour.
Hello, that's better. Everyone, my name is Kerrie Allen. I'm nominating for Calder Ward. By way of background, my family goes back quite some time in the Shire. My great-grandfather was the minister at the time, it was the Methodist Church in Malden, and my nana went to school in Malden Primary and Castlemaine High. So I'm very, very proud of the roots and the history that my family has here. I've got a property on the other side of Cancurran in Welshman's Reef and absolutely adore it. And the reason I adore it is because of what I consider to be unique environmental assets, our native fauna, native flora. We've got species that are threatened and endangered, and in my view they should be protected at all costs. People that I speak to seem to be in sync with me in that I think this entire Shire is special because of the cultural and heritage values that we have, the community spirit, and the environmental assets I outlined before. I see Calder as being pivotal in the future of the Shire as a whole because of the growth that is being dictated to us that we have to have. So socially and economically, I think if we get it right and we can balance the growth in Calder with the impacts on our natural environment, then it's going to be win-win-win in the long term, and that's why I'm passionate about running.
Hi everyone, my name's Toby Heydon, and I ran 4 years ago for the Castlemaine Ward. Was beaten fair and square by Bill and Rosie and Gary McClure. So this time round I'm standing in the Forest Creek Ward, and it's kind of with mixed emotions. I'm standing unopposed. I was really looking forward to a contest. I loved the contest last time. It was really great, and as Bill and I and Max all agreed, in 2020 it was a really good, clean and fair contest, and I love that about local council elections. So I've been door knocking in the ward in Forest Creek, and I guess some key issues that have resonated a lot of the residents in Forest Creek Ward, and that's the ward south, essentially South Castlemaine, south of Johnson Street, south of Duke Street, around access as key local government responsibilities of footpaths, roads, community engagement, inclusivity. Also, the way that we manage our public open spaces has been a really important topic of concern in Forest Creek Ward. How we maintain vegetation, how we look after our creeks and waterways, how we manage this extraordinary and welcome sustainable growth of Castlemaine. When I was at high school here, the greatest fear in Castlemaine was that the town was going to die. People were leaving at such a rate. There was a palpable sense of decline. Now we face the opposite kinds of stresses of a rapidly growing town and shire. And so how we manage growth in a sustainable way, I think is going to be crucial for the next 4 years. To their credit, the current council has invested a lot in footpaths. And that's my time.
Yeah, that was
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Mary Merajik, good morning. Nyora Nari Kelly, Warang Baguruk Bengik. I'm a Warang woman and I'm standing for Colaban. Thank you, Alex, for that beautiful acknowledgement to country. Well, first and foremost, I love where I live. I've always walked this country since I can remember, and I have a deep connection to my hometown, Friarstown, which I call Place of Windy Song. I would like to see our environment being cared for and the healing of country through strategies that include First Nations and council co-led and co-designed strategies where we can create opportunities for all voices to be heard from our communities, including youth voices, as to see what they would like as well in looking after our environment and loving where we all live. I'm passionate about habitat and wildlife and maintaining the small town character, including historical heritage as well as First Nations cultural heritage. Both are important and are part of our shared history. I believe in Koling Waranich, walking together. I strongly believe that I can represent our ward through strong advocacy, transparency, while always maintaining community values. Natne, thank you.
Morning, my name's Phillip Walker. I'm also a candidate for Colaban Ward. I'd also pay acknowledgements to Jar Jar Warrum, custodians of the land, and being able to live here. This feels a bit like a job interview, and all the questions we got asked with the CV, and they'll be uploaded later, and I'll have a lot of detail in that. I really appreciate it. When I looked at the questions, I thought, yes, this is my sort of community. Quickly, the pitch is, from global to local, climate change is the overdriving crisis. It has the capacity to kill all life on this planet. We have to deal with that first and foremost. There are a whole lot of other issues, economic crises, young people stepping out of uni with HECS debts larger than house mortgages, housing unaffordability, the gig economy, job insecurity. There is global crises, there is technological change. We can't keep pace with our ethical boundaries, and no wonder a lot of people have mental health issues. As a Shire, what can we do? One of the reasons I'm here is because of this forum. I live here because it is so great. There is a lot of good things council has done. Net Climate Zero 2025, and the next term we're going to have to do Total Climate Zero 2030. The Indigenous Roundtable, which now leads to Truth Telling and Treaty. My background, adult lifetime social justice campaigner, 30 years community development specialist internationally in other parts of Australia, 5 years with Bendigo Council and their community partnership unit. I fully support and have implemented participatory democracy. The questions we got was interesting. They were, as a council, what would you do? Is a council for this? I would like to think in 4 years' time when we meet, we're saying in partnership, what did we achieve? How far did we get? What goals did we achieve? And what else can we do together to take things forward? I've worked on implementing participatory inclusive democracy elsewhere. I'd really love to be able to do it with you. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Gavan Thomson. I'm proud to be a candidate for the Campbells Creek ward. I'm a social worker with 50 years of social advocacy behind me. Campbells Creek is not Castlemaine. It has its own history, traditions and concerns. When I moved to Campbells Creek in 1997, it was the poorer part of town. I could afford to buy a house, but no longer. Housing is now unaffordable to many. We have dozens of people sleeping rough in our Shire and hundreds seeking social and community housing. Meanwhile, there are 1,000 homes standing vacant and 300 up for short-term rental. As a Greens candidate, my values, principles and priorities are clear. I will fight for affordable housing, good planning that does not negatively impact residents, heritage and the environment, expanding community services, taking action on climate change, getting more than 2 buses a day to and from the ward, protecting platypuses and habitats along the creek, and finally getting some action on flood mitigation after 7 years of council inaction. All of this is political. Government is about politics, and it is a smokescreen to say that councillors should not be political. We no longer want councillors with long links to the Liberal or National parties hiding their true allegiances. They are just like the Egyptian crocodile, in denial. I don't want to be in denial, I want to be in the creek, engaged, innovative, tackling real problems and standing up for what really matters. The big and small issues facing the residents of Campbells Creek with their full participation. Thank you.
Hi, Lucas Maddock's my name. Honoured to say that I'll soon be declared councillor for Moonlight Creek ward after my nomination was uncontested. It's been awesome getting to know the community better in Castlemaine and particularly in Moonlight Creek ward. Gavan and I, I'm a Greens candidate too. Gavan and I have been working closely together, knocking on literally hundreds of doors. 800 doors we knocked in Moonlight Creek ward, 300 conversations on the doorsteps. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know everyone and to understand the issues that are affecting everyone. Overwhelmingly, we're hearing about the lack of affordable housing. Whether you have a house or not, it is affecting everybody because we're pushing out our essential workers, which means our services are affected. No one's modelled that link to see how severe that is and where we're going to be in 10 years' time. My hunch is that we need some really bold action on affordable housing, just as we need bold action on the environment, cost of living and also the maintenance and improvement of our services. I'm here and I'm here as a Green because I think we need bold action. I would strongly encourage everyone in the room to find out who's going to be best to lead that bold action and back them, and not just back them by voting, but helping their campaigns. There's a week to go, or a bit more, maybe 2 weeks to go. Really get behind them and let's get the diverse, representational and strong council that we need to lead the change we need. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And also just wanted to say thanks to Rosie Anir, Rosalie Houstwell and Ken Price, who are apologies for today. And thanks, Mira. I think you're going to be the hardest working person here today. But you're right, Phillip. It is a job interview because that's what councillors do. They serve the community. So, you know, there's a pressure in that, but also we're all grateful that you've put your hands up. So now we're going to start moving through the questions for the event. So for each question, we're going to have 7 minutes, and I'm going to ask who'd like to respond, select a couple of people. I'll make sure it's even across all the questions. Mira's going to let you know when you have 2 minutes left and when you've reached 3 minutes. If you want to finish sooner, that's great. We can get more voices in. So it's going to be 7 minutes per question. There'll be a hand signal when it's 1 minute and a bell when your time's up. So the first question comes from Castlemaine Community House, who probably many people know provides programs and activities contributing to community development in the community. So, in your view, what contributes to a resilient community and how can the council support that? Who'd like to answer that one? Got another taker as well as Phillip? Anyone else? All right, we'll go from Phillip to Toby. So, Phillip, you have 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Yeah,
thank you.
Up to 3 minutes.
That's all right. I'll try and be quicker. First of all, Castlemaine Community House questions were great. Community House here in Malden are real hubs of the community. I think as council, can we nurture the growth of new community houses elsewhere? Newstead, Campbell's Creek, Elphingston. With public transport from the outer areas is a problem. Malden Community House runs a community bus. Can we grow those as well? Resilient community typically references, when we talk about it, we're talking about increase in natural disasters. How do communities cope with that? I've spent a number of years internationally working as disaster management, now locally as a volunteer with an emergency services organisation. My master's thesis was on community-based disaster management and how we built that sense of resilience and community inclusion. But the questions Castlemaine Community House asks and also goes to this question of ongoing self-sufficiency and sustainability is around, as I mentioned, participatory democracy and things that council can do. For example, Newstead Community got organised, they got $1 million state government grant to put in place solar farm and panels. That is one, net zero carbon emissions, 2, drastically reduces costs, 3, means that community has power when the mainstream lines go down due to storm, flood or fire. Council can be advocating to state government to make more of those grants available, and there's operations and governance. As governance, we can be engaging with communities, how's it going. On the operations side, they'll be going out and helping communities organise. How do you get a grant? How do you put it in together? How do you come together? Can we replicate that further across onto other things as well? For example, I've got to flick my notes over. The issues around diversity and inclusion, there's a whole range of there that we're bringing, of working with stakeholders and with partners as well to be doing these things together. It also cuts across to I've run out of my thoughts. Renewable economy. People talk of roads, rates and rubbish. Rubbish now is much more how do we build a renewable economy, reduce waste, and that sort of partnership going on. We actually have so much going for us. We're a really strong community. We're multiple communities within diverse communities. I mentioned earlier the challenges we face. It's a question of building that together to make the resilience, because we know things are going to get worse before they get better, but driving our own pace of change and doing that as well, which is our self-sufficiency within us all. Thank you.
Thanks, Phillip. And thanks to the House for the question. I should declare I am the chair of the Board of Management of Castlemaine Community House. But potential conflicts. But I had no part in drafting the question. And just to...
Pulled the plug, have I, Jim?
Okay, great. To add on to Philip's points are all really salient and important ones about when we talk about resilience. And Philip has talked eloquently about environmental issues, natural disasters, emergency responses. Another side, I think, to community resilience, and this is where the House is really crucial as a kind of a centre hub, a central linchpin for the community, is in supporting lifelong learning and in supporting connection. So inclusivity and connectivity are key pillars of the Shire, have been for some time, and I think we all here support those key pillars. Castlemaine Community House does so much in this space. We could think about how the House has moved in the last few years towards more work in terms of food security. So I think lifelong learning is really important for our Shire, and not just for vocational reasons, not just better equipping school leavers or people in later stages of life preparing for career changes, but also in terms of the socialisation and the acculturation within the community. Something else I think that's really important here is to emphasise how in these times of, as Lucas pointed out earlier in his opening address, the cost of living crisis that's striking us all in this Shire means that the kinds of demands that organisations like the House have on the food pantry, for instance, is growing at a huge rate. And just to finish off, I guess one last point I'd make about resilience, is thinking about the way that different community organisations work together. I've been lucky enough to be involved in a number of different organisations across the Shire in my time here. And it's often said that Castlemaine runs on voluntary labour and voluntary commitments, and it's so true. And one of the beauties of a town of 10,000 people is that we do all tend to know each other. So we can reach out to other people at different community organisations who can lend a hand. And that's really where an organisation like the Community House really comes to the fore. One last point I'd make about the changing demographics of the Shire. We've seen a lot of retirees move to the Shire, particularly Malden Way, but all across the Shire. And that's been wonderful. They bring all sorts of skills and experience to the Shire. Often, though, we find people coming to the Shire, having a lovely retirement here, one partner might pass away, leaving another person on their own. And so social isolation is a huge issue for us. So I think a part of resilience is addressing social isolation.
Thank you. The question comes from Castlemaine Safe Space, which is a non-clinical drop-in space for anyone in emotional distress or experiencing loneliness or suicidal thoughts. Castlemaine Safe Space is community designed and led, staffed by trained peer volunteers with lived experience. So their question is, would you support and advocate for future funding to ensure the sustainability of Castlemaine Safe Space? And if so, how would you do this? Any takers? All right, great. I'll come to you first, Kerrie. And then you go.
Is it working? Yay! Again, compliments to all the groups that are behind these questions. They're excellent, and it really shows a lot of thought that's gone into what's the direction of this Shire going to look like. I'm really impressed with the passion with these community groups. Would I advocate for increased funding? Absolutely. this is just one example of something that is critical for getting back to resilience, a resilient community. I also would take that a step further by saying funding wouldn't necessarily need to come from ratepayers. So looking at Council's annual report, over 50% of the income comes from rates. On the flip side, when we look at expenses, 41% of expenses is in council costs, staff costs. So straight away that leaves me with a financial corporate background thinking, are there some efficiencies here that we could look at? Could we maybe review council expenses to see if there's some savings to be had to put back into community? And this would be one key example of where we could siphon those funds. There's any number of other ideas I've got that hopefully later on we'll have time to touch on. But resilience of the community, environmental protection, water for wildlife in our green spaces, in our parks, in our forests, where we can work with Parks Victoria. I'd also like to see funds getting channeled back into community groups and landowners and residents for their conservation work. Because I know farmers get a lot of assistance by way of grants and council incentives to look after the environment, but the rest of us often don't. So they're just some ideas that I've got. I think ratepayers don't necessarily need to fund more, but there could perhaps be efficiencies in council. Thank you.
What a great question. I really applaud the Safe Spaces initiative in this Shire. That's a topic very dear to my heart. I spent 20 years working in suicide prevention and suicide response as a social worker in this Shire and elsewhere. The sad fact is that for people in Australia aged 15 to 30, suicide is the leading cause of death. We need to do whatever we can to address suicide locally, particularly for young people. Safe Spaces is a great initiative because it offers literally a safe space for people to go and get support around whatever mental health, depression, anxiety or other challenges they're dealing with. I think it needs the full council support, it needs to expand, and it needs to attract well-qualified and experienced people to offer that support. As a councillor, I would fully support it.
Thank you. And if the ushers with clipboards could just wave. We're not taking any questions from the floor today because we've had such considered questions from groups, but Zoe, Alex and Lawrence have clipboards, so if there are questions or thoughts that you want to add or any feedback, we will collect them and make sure everyone gets that afterwards. Yep. So now we're coming to a question from My Home Network, which is a local network made up of people with lived experience of housing crisis and homelessness, community members with diverse expertise with community and government organisations. The network believes that everyone has a right to safe, affordable, secure, sustainable and appropriate housing that recognises their place in and connections to community and country. And they'd like to know, if elected, would you join the My Home Network and support their work? A couple of people, got Lucas. We'll probably have a bit more time on this one if anyone else? All right. Unless anyone else puts their hands up, it'll be Lucas and Phillip. All right. Thanks, Lucas.
Thank you, Alex. Praise to all the community groups that have put forward questions. It's something that's become very apparent to me that we're an incredibly lucky Shire to have so many dedicated community groups and volunteers just driving so much of the action that we need here. And I think there's no better example than My Home Network in this case. I've crossed paths with them many times now, looking into the housing issues that the Greens are so concerned with. So would we prioritise housing for people experiencing homelessness? The sad and confronting truth on this issue is that we are being completely failed by our state and federal governments on this. We have, and I don't have the stats in mind, but a phenomenal lack of public and social housing in this Shire, across the whole state, but particularly in this Shire as well. This is the sort of housing which can be emergency housing, and it can be housing for people who need it most. There is an absolute need there. Councils, and this speaks to a later question perhaps, but council can play a really important role in its advocacy for the needs of the Shire. They may not have the means to build public housing at scale themselves, although they have responsibilities there as well. But where they can't, they can advocate really strongly. So I would want to see council, and council are already doing good work alongside My Home Network with this kind of advocacy. There can always be more, especially for a group like people facing homelessness, because they are often the most underrepresented. And yeah, so much praise to My Home Network for sticking up for this group. Yeah.
Did you want to jump in on this, Kerrie Ann? Did you want to respond to this one?
Yes, I'd like to.
Yeah, go for it.
So it was, will I join My Home Network? Yes. Yep. So, of course I would. I believe in sustainable and eco-friendly housing options for community. But also, I've heard some of the great things that are happening in that space and the initiatives that are already underway through My Home Network to address the urgent housing crisis. And I believe that when council and community groups all work together, great things can happen. I believe in affordable housing. It's really important so residents aren't priced out of the community. Too many people are living with housing insecurity, and I believe more social housing units need to be built with ecological, social and inclusive needs in mind to support everybody from all demographics, all backgrounds, all age groups and cultural backgrounds. It's just, housing is a basic need. It's a human right. Everybody should have access to housing, and we really need to make that happen. Thank you.
We do have a couple more minutes if you wanted to respond as well, Phillip.
I'll just be very quick and certainly endorsing those, but it was an illuminating experience a few weeks ago one evening, and some person came up on the street to me and said, "I'm homeless, where do I go?" And I have to admit I was speechless. I didn't have an answer, and it just felt so gut-tearing that I couldn't say that to someone. And it's working with the stakeholder partners. What do we do for emergency housing? Is it with partners around setting up a dormitory? Is there single bedrooms? In Europe, they're experimenting with sleeping pods they put out. I don't have the answers, but I think openly and transparently with My Home Network, the other housing groups, how can we find some solutions for people who turn up here and don't have anywhere to sleep? Because it's one of the fundamental first three principal steps on the humanitarian ladder: food, water, shelter. Thank you.
Mount Alexander Shire Accommodation and Respite Group are an independent, non-political, non-for-profit charitable organisation working with people with intellectual disabilities and their carers in Castlemaine and surrounds. They have built a much-needed respite house in Melissa Court in Mackenzie Hill that opened in 2016, and now they're advocating for the right of people with an intellectual disability to have a safe, secure and affordable long-term housing in Castlemaine. So the question is, do you acknowledge that the needs of people with disabilities, and particularly those with intellectual disabilities, are different to others, and how will this be considered in decisions about social and affordable housing? Got one taker? Anyone else? Haven't heard from you yet, Max and Bill. Don't have to. All right, Toby will come to you, and Kerrie Ann. Yeah, Toby, thanks.
So in response to that, yes, absolutely. I think there are particular needs for people living with disabilities. And in a way, this relates to the previous the previous question about housing more broadly. But a lot of people with, and I think the question was particularly around people with intellectual disabilities. There is a substantial community of people in our Shire with intellectual disabilities, and a number of people living with intellectual disabilities in independent living in Castlemaine. I've spoken earlier about footpaths. One point that comes back to me all the time for people with intellectual and physical disabilities is that the relative small number of streets in our town where people can actually hopefully live in terms of access. I have someone who lives near me in South Castlemaine who can't go out, can't leave her house if it's rained in the last 24 hours because the verge is too muddy and she can't get her chair across that mud to get onto the road, where she then travels down the road down to Johnston Street to travel up the footpaths there. And this is an issue across the town and across the Shire. Another point, just quickly though, and I don't want to hog the microphone, I feel like I've already had a go, is that when we look at, so we can draw a map, I've made a map of Castlemaine and the streets that people with disabilities can feasibly look to live in, and then when you narrow that down and cross-section that with affordable rental housing, it's a vanishingly small set of properties that are available for people. The fastest growing demand for houses in our Shire are for 2 and 3 people households, right? If we go back to the census of 1991, the average household in the Shire was around 4.1, 4.2 people. Now it's down to 1.8 to 1.9. And that's no different among people with intellectual disabilities. So we need to think as a council specifically around providing those small houses, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. That's far more important to us than the large housing estates in Mackenzie's Hill or Diamond Gully.
So the question was, do I acknowledge people with disabilities? I'm just redoing the question so I know where I'm going from that, and how they are different from others. Look, I absolutely do. I live it every day. I'm neurodiverse. I've been on the spectrum all of my life, didn't know it till 7 years ago. I understand why now. Things happen for me differently and why I see things differently. And again, you'll see me flipping through my notes because I get a bit, confused and scattered at times, and this is the way I deal with it. My son is also neurodiverse and has a mild ID. The housing situation is that for us, we are lucky enough to have a granny flat that was a generational granny flat for my great-grandma, but not everyone is lucky to have what we have. And so for me, I believe that housing for people with any disabilities is so important, and I would be encouraging the cross-pollination and the collaboration and relationship building between organisations with shared needs and interest, in this case as it relates to housing, but also acknowledging the ongoing challenges in that space. So it's still something we need to be all working on, but working together I think is the key in bringing this to the forefront of our community. Thank you.
Am I on? Yeah. I'll just jump in really quickly because I think one of the practical sort of answers to a question like that is community housing. So that's council collaborating with a community housing organisation, usually giving them land and then building housing that's targeted at a social need. And that's something that council's already doing on a number of occasions. It can be expanded. I'd love to see it expanded here and for a bunch of other demographics too.
And just letting you know, I think Jim will be putting the volume down when you're not using the mic and then turning it up when you pick it up. So if it takes a moment to start, I reckon that might be why. Is that right, Jim? Yes. Okay, so the next question, Billy Lister, who was a Young Citizen of the Year in 2022, canvassed a bunch of young people in the Shire, and one of their questions is, The 2023 to 2026 Mount Alexander Shire Middle Years Plan was adopted last year. How would you ensure that those recommendations are implemented and delivered efficiently? Who's going to respond to the young people of the Shire? I've got one from Bill. We haven't heard from you yet. Go for it, Bill. And
very simply, by implementing it and making sure it's done. It's as simple as that. The young people are the future, so they need looking after. It's just a matter of implementing it and making sure the staff do it. By implementing it, how would you do it?
Well, that was a good follow-up question, but we won't take too much heckling from the floor. But as someone who has been on council, maybe you can tell us about the process of implementing particular policies or plans that get developed in a nutshell.
It's like, if you've got a policy there, you make sure that it's enacted by the staff and by the councillors and continually monitor it going through. I just might make a comment about that housing issue. The council has at the moment a plan to turn the council car park and the old Gavan building into community housing, affordable housing. We've also just done one at Newstead and one at Malden, that there's going to be about 8 units. And the housing trust that has been set up, there's $500,000 set aside to help that grow. So council is addressing housing.
Thank you. Did I see your hand up, Gavin? Yeah.
I really support the Mount Alexander Shire Middle Years Plan. I've worked in youth services for many years and understand how important it is to have thriving young people in a thriving shire. In fact, a good measure of a shire's community and social equity is the well-being of young people. Sadly, in this state, for very good reasons, rural young people are rural Victoria's biggest export. People move to the cities for valid reasons, for school, for training, for employment. But rural shires like this one need to do all they can to retain young people, to offer them the opportunities they need, and to also make sure they move back here. Our population profile has a big gap from 18 to 30, and we need to do whatever we can to retain and support young people. And the middle year plan is a good step towards that. I would push for council to support and resource a steering group, provide the funds as agreed, offer expertise and assistance that would help ensure the success of the plan. I would then support an evaluation of the plan and that the learnings from the plan come to the council. I then support developing a new plan post the existing one from 2026.
Jump in on that as well? Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah, just a couple of minutes. We'll do 2 minutes.
Okay, so our young people are going into the future, and so am I. I'm not going to be left behind. I would review the budget, the recommendations within the report, and contribute to the future update of the Middle Years Plan. I will participate in Council's role for the Middle Years Plan by leading, facilitating, supporting and advocating towards the challenges that our young people face. I would advocate for the priorities and challenges raised by our young people within the Middle Years Plan and see where it interconnects with the council plan and other initiatives related to youth within our shire. I would endeavour to visit schools, functions and community activities to speak with our young people who are facing these barriers and ask how we can work better for them.
Thank you. The next question comes from Castlemaine Commons, and as I said at the beginning, not everyone is neutral. We all wear different hats in the community, and I'm actually a member of Castlemaine Commons, but I didn't have as much to do with putting these questions together because I tried to keep some separation. But Castlemaine Commons are a small collective that works responsibly, hosting events and discussions, working on community connection, sense-making and actions. They're also part of the First Nations Solidarity Network, Leonunok, and which is a non-Indigenous community group network that's understanding our responsibility to walk together in right relationship with a commitment to truth-telling. So this is a question about how to support First Nations community, and since the referendum we've seen an increase in racism in schools and across the community. The question is, how will you address this division and ensure there is accountability and transparency about the learning and truth-telling that's needed? One, and anyone else? Phillip, anyone else like to answer that one? Right, we'll come to you, Kerrie Allen, and then Phillip.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you to all our allies and friends who walk with us. That's first and foremost. Also, I am a director at Naldrun Aboriginal Education Corporation, so I'd like to make that transparent. I hear and I feel our community and all of what community is experiencing. As a First Nations woman who has children in this Shire who is being subjected to racism, I believe in calling it out, standing strong and fighting more opportunities for truth-telling and educating our communities. Through initiatives where First Nations people and our allies and wider community can walk together as a collective, these could include school-based initiatives to promote and support Indigenous education delivery in our local schools, working closely with CESOs, the Koori Education Support Officers, as well as other community initiatives like co-led, co-designed projects such as a potential Mount Alexander Shire biodiversity strategy. I would advocate strongly for more signage, dual language places and interpretation of places and spaces within our Shire, which focuses on First Nations stories and perspectives, and then linking or noting the historical story behind a place as well. We're not going to go away. We're still here, and we will always be here, and zero tolerance towards racism. Thank you.
Fully endorse those comments. One of the glowing lights about our Shire is that we voted in favour of the Voice, and I was an active campaigner for the Voice. But we do have to acknowledge racism does exist in the Shire. I've a long time combating racism in the white community, be it targeted at First Nations people or multicultural communities. I've got a long history of working in support of multicultural communities and also living overseas in non-Western societies and know how much they can contribute. Sometimes it seems like progress can be terribly slow and sometimes it can be beautiful. I was raised in Melbourne. We were taught the story of John Batman and his smoke and mirrors, and we've discovered that's a lie. I live in Chewton. In Reconciliation Week this year, Chewton Primary School, the students put on an absolutely brilliant display that went all the way from the primary school to, hope I pronounce it correctly, Me Munduk, the grandmother tree. And it was just so overwhelming. And that's a change that's happened, and that's beautiful. And again, that's the sort of initiatives that we wish to support. First Nations people must be in the leadership of this. Truth-telling, I was working in South Africa, was there for Liberation, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was liberating for so many people, for people who have been historic victims to be able to tell their stories, and for those like us who have been beneficiaries, but some people were almost oblivious of what happened. It was illuminating. And I think of some of those who have been beneficiaries of the white colonial settler state of Australia that have to commit and work towards redressing that situation. And certainly I give my commitment to that as a councillor through the Indigenous Roundtable and supporting the treaty truth-telling and treaty process. Thank you.
This one you don't need to make a comment, but you can just raise your hand if you agree. I've got two questions here. To inform your leadership decisions, will you personally commit to ongoing learning about anti-racism, truth-telling and colonisation? Feel free to raise your hand if you would. And the second one is, would you support offering and increase professional development for all council staff in cultural awareness and anti-racism, making this a requirement for councillors and executive within council? Great, I'd like to see that. Just letting everyone know we're almost at the halfway point with our questions, but we've got a while with you yet. So yeah, feel free to have a stretch if you need to go to the bathroom, come in and out. And I don't think many people have come in and out, but again, there's clipboards if you want to share notes and questions. So the next question's from the Mount Alexander Shire Disability Advocacy Group. They're an independent volunteer advocate, proudly auspiced by Castlemaine Community House. Their aim is to remove barriers and promote systemic change that supports equitable social participation for people with a wide range of disabilities in the Shire, their families and their friends. And again, I'll get you to raise your hands and then find out who's keen to speak to this. So, are the candidates aware of the Mount Alexander Disability and Inclusion Action Plan? So raise your hand if you're familiar with that plan. Thank you. And would you fully support all aspects of accessibility in the Shire as outlined in this plan, which includes removing barriers for employment, the built environment, public spaces including footpaths, toilets and transport? Nice to see. Thank you. And now who would like to speak to this question? Would anyone like to respond? Max, we'll come to you first. Thanks.
Can you hear me? I've got a different approach altogether. And yes, I have worked with the said groups in the past. But what I'm on about is about the preventative disability. And that's something that is broadened the aspect of what is happening. An example is very, very simple. I've got some nice pictures here to hold up. There's a nice, oops. There's a nice picture. The growing disability, this is about preventing disability. The growing disability now is with young people and screen time. And that's absolutely will develop into great problems with walking and seeing disabilities. And this is a crisis that's in our community, and I've worked together with the optometrists and young people to develop this particular concept about disability, which is totally different. And it's been transposed into actual physical objects, to like jigsaws and games. And we've also worked with the Parks Victoria to develop walks and to work with the other side of people with dementia. This is another whole disability aspect that's different from physical. And these are things that develop quietly behind the scenes without a great deal of fanfare. And groups have taken part in that and helping that area of dementia and loneliness. The biggest crisis in the world, health crisis, is loneliness. We can have whatever policies we like, and we've heard some great ideas, but the greatest crisis affecting everybody is loneliness. And that is a massive disability for young people and for older people like myself. I'm working flat out with that, yes, I can wait, most days of the week on working out with loneliness and engaging the community in and out of this area in those aspects. It's something a bit different and maybe hasn't been given enough thought to, but it really is affecting it. As I said, the crisis is with young people and screen time. Thank you.
Anyone else that wanted to respond to the question from the Mount Alexander Shire Disability Advocacy Group? Yep, Kerrie, thanks.
Is this working? Oh, good. I think Max raised some really good points, and that is, as a council can look at what is known and visible and the problems today with infrastructure and direct support. But I agree, it's another thing altogether to consider what is perhaps not so visible. Emerging issues with mental health is a big one. So I think council plays a big part in awareness for those things as well. There's a lot we could do for loneliness, dementia. There's plenty of studies on, particularly overseas, they seem to be more advanced than us in a lot of ways, on ways that we could identify triggers for dementia and mental health and knock it on the head before it becomes a thing. So I'd like to see council become a little bit more proactive with those issues.
And again, if you weren't here at the beginning, not everyone's going to respond to every question, but as many questions as we get back will be available on the Meet the Candidates mountalexander.com.au website. So now we come to a question from the Castlemaine School Strike for Climate. This is a network of school students united by their concern for the future of our planet and all life on it. So their question is, what role do you think that council can play in fighting the climate crisis? Would you advocate to a state and federal level to take stronger action on climate if you were elected? Anyone else? Just a few, that's good. All right, we'll start with you, Gavan, and then we'll rotate.
The council has recognised that there is a climate emergency, and it does have a climate action plan. And a lot of our work was done by community activists who spent a lot of time advocating for the council to do that. And I want to also acknowledge the great work that Bronwyn Mackin, the former Greens councillor, did in supporting that. The council needs not only to have its own climate action plan, but also needs to be an advocate for climate action at all other levels of government too. As local people who see the impact of climate action, and local government is the very best government for connecting with local people. The council needs to advise locals and fund local initiatives such as solar for tenants, community batteries, and find sources of state and federal funds to support climate action locally. It also needs, unfortunately, to plan for a future with climate change impacts at the Shire level. And I'm thinking of that snowstorm we had recently, a classic example of a severe, irregular, and now predictable change in the weather.
Thanks. I think we've got time for everyone to jump in on this one. So who was up for speaking as well? Phillip, and then,
I will be brief because I've already said climate change is the overriding issue. It affects if we don't deal with that, everything else we do becomes mute. I've mentioned a number of initiatives. I certainly endorse the comments that Gavan made. As a community, we must be working on this and advocating to government as well. At a federal level, has to be, no more fossil fuel plants. We've got to rapidly transition at federal level, perhaps even face some more internationally drawdowns. But as a community, it's the sort of initiatives that Gavan mentioned, and we work together on this. Thank you.
Thanks. And just a couple of quick points. So, unlike many other communities in Victoria, we're lucky in that our local media really got behind our student school strikers. A lot of the Melbourne and other country town school communities where the school strikers came from were not so generous in their support for the student strikers. The Castlemaine Mail, Main FM, Castlemania. We're all really warm in their support for the student strikers, and that I think we'd all agree reflects the general community feeling around what Phillip was saying about climate change, global warming being the fundamental existential issue of our time. And as some others have mentioned, there are some really important initiatives happening in the Shire, and I've no doubt that the incoming council will be just as enthusiastic in supporting those measures as has the previous council. One final point there, I think in some ways it's often important for those of us who are not young people to listen to the voices of our youth. I think Bill made the point earlier that youth are our future, of course, and I think it's extraordinary that expression of energy and political activism from teenagers across the Shire. And I look forward to hearing more from those students and from the next generation of student activists that will no doubt come in their wake.
Max, did you want to jump in on that too? Or were you going to grab it, Kerrie? You can both. We've got time for Kerrie, Max and then Kelly Ann, so we'll start with Kerrie.
I'll be really quick. Hats off to this group. It's one of my favourites. And well done. Keep up your advocacy. I think the position of council is first and foremost to support such a group and to advocate with other levels of government, definitely. But at a local level, there are perhaps some things that we could do as well. And I'd love to weave in our young people to have more of a say in some of these initiatives. But just a few ideas come to mind. For a start, we shouldn't be building on flood-prone areas. There's been a little bit of noise on that in the Harcourt area, I've noticed. Solar, we could be putting solar panels on existing commercial buildings, covered car parks. These are just changes in planning thought processes, I think. Underground dams. This is something that overseas is being done. There's a special name for them, I can't remember them at the moment, but when it floods, it would be perfect to be able to capture the storm water, A, so it doesn't flood where it's not meant to, but B, so that when we're in times of drought, which will happen, we've got underground water that we can access when we need it. Simple things like having lights off initiatives, more Earth Days from an awareness perspective. These are just some things that, if community is behind it, that perhaps we could implement at a local level.
I'm responding to the young people that they need to do homework and research, because a few years ago we had a full-day symposium on climate change. It was a pioneering event in local government, never happened before, and I was one of the initiators and movers of that event, and I guess that will continue with the next council.
Thank you so much, Castlemaine School Strike, for all the hard work you young people do. This is your future. This is your future. So I would strongly advocate for our ward or Shire to be a plastic bag-free town, more electric charges for eco-cars, more safe bike lanes, encouraging people to use farmers markets and green grocers, but also walking together in a two-way learning journey, bringing Western knowledges and First Nations knowledges together so we can better combat this climate crisis we have, and bringing those knowledges together, we can only do good by walking together for your future.
And we'll stay with climate for a moment with another question from the Central Vic Climate Action Group, which is a grassroots community group made up of climate concerned citizens working together for climate action. And again, this would be a great one to get a show of hands on. Given that the Mount Alexander Shire Council declared a climate emergency and the UN peak scientific climate body, the IPCC, said in March 2023 there can be no new fossil fuel projects if we're ever to have a chance of aligning with the Paris Agreement, will you support Council taking action to change its default super fund to its employees to an ethical fund that has ruled out investing in companies doing new fossil fuel projects? Just a show of hands on that one. Great, thank you. Is there anyone that wanted to speak to that, to superannuation and council? Bill, you want to jump in on that one?
It's a good idea to find those organisations that are ethical. However, you need to check, or council would need to check with the superannuation rules, the return that may come from it. So it's possible, but it's not guaranteed.
Council can advocate for one ethical provider, but fundamentally it's up to the workers who they choose to put their super with, so that needs to be said too.
Like this on many issues, council is in a leadership position and should be showing leadership, should model what good leadership is. In this regard, it is investing your money somewhere ethically. And there was a good talk in town recently, not on climate change, but on super funds and nuclear weapons manufacturers. And there's just so many of these funds, they're only looking at the dollars, and they end up doing incredibly unethical things. But when you look at the ethical things and you make adjustments, it makes very little difference to the dollars. So it's just a... and look, I'm not over climate impacts and super, but I definitely, from that talk in nuclear, I'm confident that it doesn't need to affect bottom lines. Obviously, it's a choice. It's a little bit of work. Council's in a really good place to do it. Just do the work, figure out what's good, and make the recommendation. Simple.
Yep, I transferred my super from an industry fund to an ethical fund, and by ethical I would consider no investment in fossil fuels, no investments in armaments or any weapons manufacture, nothing in tobacco, alcohol or gambling. I endorse the comments. I think council can provide leadership on this. It is an individual worker's choice. The other point I'd bring in, it would do it in negotiations with the unions and get them on board. In previous life I was a union shop steward organiser and I remain a unionist at heart. Thank you.
All right, question 9. Actually, this is now question 10 because I swapped the order. Castlemaine Pride is a volunteer-led community group that organises the excellent Pride Festival every year, and the community grew out of the local grassroots movement in support of marriage equality. They'll continue to support and connect the local LGBTIQA community and advocate for the inclusion and safety of LGBTIQ+ people in the Mount Alexander Shire. Not one candidate in the Mount Alexander Shire elected in 2020 fully supported the Rainbow Local Government Pledge. Some candidates didn't even take part in the survey. So again, a show of hands before I asked for speakers. Will you vow to take the Rainbow Pledge put forth by the Victorian Pride Lobby and support the priorities of the LGBTIQA+ people in our community?
I've already done it.
Gold star, Kerrie Allen. Okay.
Clarify that it is a little bit incorrect because halfway through the term of council it changed, and so I came on board, and so there is a difference. So that the statement can't be all sweeping, because I do work with young people and initiated a whole lot of programs. So I just want to clarify that point. It wasn't the total council for that full term.
Do you want to speak to your commitments more broadly to the LGBTIQA+ community? Well, you've got the mic. Thanks for correcting that, but anything further?
I know it's a technical thing, but it is important because the work that I do in the community, and I'm speaking in afterwards, cuts across all of these different groups of people, and they know I've been supporting them quietly, behind the scenes for quite a number of years, through even council's people as well as the general community.
Thanks. The current council has a LGBTQ+ steering group, and I've been the councillor on that for the last 4 years. It's very supportive of the community, and as I said at the start, Mount Alexander Shire is a very diverse community, very accepting, and more, you're talking about the population being old and young. In the 80s and 90s, the older members of that community came here to retire. Now the 40-year-olds are moving here and working in Melbourne. And I've never seen anybody, when I get out and about, abuse those people. And even when I was at school, so 1975, there was openly members, young children, open, and nobody abused them. It is a very accepting community.
We've still got a bit of time on this question if anyone else wanted to jump in. Yeah, Gavan. Thanks.
Homophobic abuse happens in all communities, including this one, and I think that the council needs to play a leading role in actions, policies and practices that address, prevent and support the eradication of homophobia and the support of LGBTIQ plus people.
Yeah, just to, and I guess in agreeing with Gavan and Bill, it's not just council that's taken a lead on this, and across the community, the Pride, Castlemaine Pride as part of the community house. There's so many organisations in Castlemaine that have taken a real front foot lead on LGBTIQ plus issues and trans issues. And so I think I think Bill's comments are really interesting. Like I have the same reflection when I was at school in the 80s, that we've been, not to say there aren't issues, of course there are always issues, but we are kind of fortunate when we compare ourselves to a lot of other country Victorian shires, that we have got a lot of community organisations who are leading in this space. So I just wanted to shout out to all those organisations that are working so hard for inclusion across the Shire.
Thanks. And I guess, that difference in experience points to, what it is to have lived experience versus to be an observer. And one of the things that's so great about all the questions that we've had come forward today is that they've come from so many community organisations that have that real lived expertise. So actually, while we maybe this will help you have a stretch too, is there anyone here who's been part of a group that's put together a question or fed in Free Palestine Central Vic? Free Palestine Central Vic are a Castlemaine-based community organising and action group who many people have probably seen meet regularly here in Jarrah Park. So if elected as a local councillor at the October 2024 local government elections, do you commit to ensuring that the council adopts an active and consistent position on human rights and demonstrates this by formally committing to cultural diversity and inclusion within your first 2 years? So again, let's have a show of hands for those of you that do make that commitment, and then who'd like to speak to this question? Max, Phillip, I haven't heard from you for a moment. You grab the mic first, and then we'll come to you, Max, and then Kerrie Allen.
Thank you. Possibly the question is not wanting to dominate the last one I answer, although if there's some chance towards the end, it'd be nice to throw in something related to these specific elections. I believe I've talked about cultural diversity and involvement quite a bit. As I mentioned, when I arrived, I've done 5 years of contracts with Bendigo Council, particularly around cultural diversity and inclusion. First job was support to the Muslim community with construction of the mosque up there. Worked on strategic development with them, etc. Free Palestine also asked a question in the written ones directly to Palestine. I would like a bit of an opportunity to talk to that, please. I've got a long history involved in that, and I've put the answers on the CV. I would think one of the things in accordance with what's going on at the moment between the river and the sea that council can be doing is first of all just calling for a ceasefire now, unconditional, unilateral, just stop the bloody killing, please. It's gone on for too long. There are people in this community of different perspectives and values, but who have been affected by that and are traumatised by that. And irrespective of what we think or feel, we, as a council, as a community, we have a duty of care towards them and their mental health. 1990s, I was fortunate to live in South Africa. I was there for the end of apartheid and the glory of liberation. I was predominantly working in water sector reform, although also got involved. I was living in one of the old Bandistans in terms of local government for the first time, establishing inclusive local government between black and white communities, and I bring those lessons. And we're here for the long haul. We've settled in Chewton, we're not going anywhere. Earlier this century, I spent a few years with international humanitarian organisations working in war zones, and I've seen more on how horrible it is. I call out all crimes against humanity, no matter who commits them. I know there can be, look over there, there's a state actor who's got a massive long list of war crimes, but there are non-state actors as well. And one of the lessons I took from South Africa, we talk here about driving our own local development, and international allies are essential, but the change has to be driven internally. In South Africa, the rise of the United Democratic Front was one of the fundamental things that brought an end to apartheid there. In that region between the river and the sea, I want to give a call out to a few organisations, the Palestinian Women for Peace and their Israeli counterpart, Palestinian Women of the Sun and their Israeli counterpart, Women for Peace, B'Tselem, Breaking the Silence, Standing Together, and the predominantly men's group Combatants for Peace, soldiers who have put down their weapons. Their hands across the apartheid wall in that part of the world. We want them to grow them and to nurture them, and so that they can tear down that wall, because there are 14 million people there, 7 million Israeli citizens, 7 million Palestinians, and they're not going anywhere, and a way has to be found. And the very final point I would make is, as a council, what can we be doing? One thing, and this would relate to the question from refugees. Thank you, Rob. It's a great respect to you, mate, and to your father as well. Yeah, sorry, one point, please. As a council, can we go to the federal government and say, we're a welcoming community, we will take refugees from Gaza, send them to us, we'll give them a haven, and Sudan as well, because there's a genocide going on there also, and nobody's watching it.
Thanks, Phil. I had Max and Kerrie Allen and then Toby, so.
This is a hard one. I was happened to be at the council meeting when that particular group came, and they were told that it wasn't a council matter, and that may be so. Now here's the difficulty that I have to face. I work across the whole community. I'm a volunteer for the local press. I've been doing it for 20 years. No one else is going to take over the job that I've done. I'm able to go right through all the different communities, the different religious backgrounds, the different ethnic backgrounds and different people, and I'm accepted everywhere. If I take a particular stand, that isn't going to quite work. Now the other point that I want to make here is, and this is this difficulty, again, one needs to do homework and research. A few years ago, the Jewish community in the Shire celebrated not so much the birthday, but the work that the one particular Aboriginal person that did, speaking out against the Holocaust and the Second World War at the UN. And they had publicity. That was in the middle of town. I took the photos, and then they had meetings afterwards supporting that particular person, an Aboriginal, who sided with them. So we have this problem in the community. We can't take sides, because you're going to affect somebody, you're going to affect somebody's mental health, one way or the other, whether that's for or against the diversity of this community. And I've seen how people of different nationalities and different religions have been affected by this topic. Is it something that local government can get involved with? That'll be up to the next council to make a move.
Thanks.
Kellyanne? That was Uncle William Cooper you were talking about. So, look, this is something my old people went through. I'm a product of that. I am hearing the pain and the anguish that local community are going through and witnessing the horrors of what is happening in Palestine. I'm here to listen. What messages community want me to bring to the table and learning more. But also, I would not be fearful to express what people want. If I was elected, my role is messenger, listener, carer, and I'm here to stand up for everybody. I want to be able to bring voices to the table and strongly advocate for them. I'm committed to upholding human rights. My whole work, my life, is about human rights and advocating for rights for my people, as well as country, animals, everybody. The rights of community and country. And what affects us here is a ripple effect of what's going on out there. Ceasefire now.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, look, an active and consistent position on human rights, absolutely. Whether that's in Gaza, in our own Shire, of course, like unequivocally. I guess the reason I didn't put my hand up to that pledge was because, as you probably know, Council has a position which is to not bear on matters of international, national or state issues. And so until that was changed or overturned, then I don't see that it's my role to be advocating or lobbying state or federal governments on the matter of Palestine. But I really appreciate the work of Free Palestine Central Victoria, and I look forward to more engagement and conversations with them.
And I'll just follow up on the piece of that question that was around formally committing to cultural diversity and inclusion policies at Council. So that was the one that we put our hands up for. And now we're coming to a question from Rural Australians for Refugees in Castlemaine. They're a grassroots volunteer-led community group who are united in supporting a compassionate approach towards refugees and people seeking asylum. In 2014, Mount Alexander Shire made a statement of commitment to being a refugee welcome zone. Council, in conjunction with Rural Australian for Refugees Castlemaine and Modern Capacity Multicultural Services, developed an action plan for the years 2018 to 2021. Would you support restating the commitment, declaring Mount Alexander Shire a refugee welcome zone, and advocate for a review of the action plan? So that's a hands up question. Thank you. And the question now that I'd love to hear from some of you is, what would you do to welcome refugees and promote inclusiveness and acceptance of cultural diversity in the Shire? I'm just looking at my tally. We haven't heard from Kerrie and Bill as much as others. If either of you wanted to jump in on that, you're welcome. And who else had their hand up? Quick from Phillip. Okay, thanks, Bill.
The community has many organisations that could participate and welcome the refugees into the community. Rotary is one of them, the Lions Club, CWA, whatever. And as I said earlier, it's an accepting community, it's diverse, so refugees certainly are welcome here.
Thank you. As a country, it's a bit bizarre. We support selling armaments overseas, such as the Weapons Expo that was recently in Melbourne. And then when people are fleeing conflict and arrive on these here seeking a refuge, the country sticks them in gulags offshore. I certainly give my acknowledgement to Rural Australians for Refugees. I've worked in refugee camps, there are places. But just to reiterate the final point I was making before, and I disagree with Toby, and my interpretation of the resolution Council adopted was that they have the right not to have to adopt positions, not that they cannot. And I think they certainly can say they're not going to adopt a position on something, but they can. And it's just to repeat that as a Shire, we've got housing issues and whatever, but we're also wealthy. I'd be going to the federal government and saying, we will take refugees from Gaza and also trying to get out of the genocide in Sudan, and we'll give them a safe haven. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think this goes back to another question about inclusivity and diversity and encouraging that. I'm a little bit cautious of these broad statements like we're a diverse and welcoming community. That may overwhelmingly be true, and I hope that's the case, and it's been my experience. But there's a lot of other people who have a lot of different experiences of that that may not experience it as a welcoming community. And I think the training around cultural diversity and inclusion is key to understanding where our blind spots are. And acknowledging that we may have them is the first step in recognising that we may not be inclusive and may have work to do. And I'm sure somewhere we have work to do.
Said, so I'm not going to say anything else. Thank you.
We've just got a couple left. So this one again will be a hands up one. It's a bonus question from My Home Network. Would you support My Housing Network's advocacy to council to engage with the Shire's residents to encourage the release of over 1,000 vacant dwellings, not including primary and secondary Airbnbs and Bs, in the Shire as affordable rentals or transition housing? Excellent. I'm going to read back everything that you've pledged at the end and remind you that it's all on camera. So, and our last question for today is again from Castlemaine Commons. JARA, the Dja Wurrung Clans Aboriginal Corporation, and the Naldaran Education Aboriginal Organisation provide an important contribution to this community. Will you commit to strengthening the collaborative relationships and support that have been built between the Mount Alexander Shire Council and these orgs, as well as other local First Nations-led enterprises and organisations? You can put your hands up. And Kerrie Allen can go first. No, third. Okay, well, that means I need 2 more people. Anyone else want to put their hand up? This is the last question about how you work with First Nations organisations and enterprises locally, if elected. Max, Lucas, Gavan, and then Kerrie Allen. Okay, thanks. Thanks, Max.
Okay, this is a little bit different. Again, this is via the work that I'm doing in local government. I've been working with Parks Victoria and in my local area to help publicise and encourage the culture of the original inhabitants up through the Garfield Water Wheel area, the National Park. And I've been doing that for a number of years quietly as part of a tourism initiative. And it's great to see the people coming into that park understanding the signage that's there about First Nations and walking through the environment. Now that's something that's been done quietly and distributing a lot of printed material, thousands of bits of material to publicise and to help this community. Very unusual it is, but I can assure you it's working. It's just a different approach, not a real formal one, but an informal approach. And I feel real good to do it. Thank you.
This is an incredibly important issue. Our principles are that we work with First Nations people when they want to work with us. We work with them when they are leading. We acknowledge their wisdom, we acknowledge their knowledge of country, and we acknowledge their dispossession and the impact of colonialisation. They must lead us towards, and we must acknowledge that they need to, we ask them to lead us towards truth, reconciliation and treaty.
Okay, so thank you. I just want to say, when we say working together or strengthening true and meaningful partnerships, this is not just about consultation, okay? This is not about just asking and seeing what you have to say. We are beyond that. We're saying true and meaningful collaboration. Walk the walk, don't just talk the talk. You know, we need to be able to walk together, and that means co-led and co-design in whatever space we can, walking with our First Nations people, listening to their perspectives, understanding what we have to offer to show you how we care for country, how we look after community, and then just listening to us and not just fluffing us off with the whole, oh yeah, we hear you. So every time you do an acknowledgement, you know, think it, feel it. Don't just think it as words, actually feel it in your body, because again, it's about authentic and true and meaningful collaboration, not just consultation. Nyate.
Thanks for that great question. I think actually, like, walking together is about walking together. It's not about expecting First Nations communities to do all the work on this. There is actually a lot of leadership and work that white fellas can do. I get a bit sick of hearing white fellas talk about how, this is for First Nations people to lead. Of course, there's leadership for First Nations, but that can be a cop out too. I think one of the great things about Shire is the way that white fellas have led in some of these instances. One area that I thought dual naming and recognition of Djawaran language has come up, and I've had quite a strong history in lobbying state government, the Register of Public Names for name changes. I was involved with the Gurraward name change back in the early 1990s. I was lucky enough to work with the Victorian Aboriginal Corporation for Languages for many years and wrote a dictionary of Aboriginal place names. And one thing that I'm really looking forward to getting my teeth into on council is advocating for dual naming of some key landscape forms within the Shire. I think it's really important. We can even think about renaming the Shire itself. Why we've got nothing against Greek history. I'm right into Alexander and Macedon. But we have perfectly appropriate First Nations names, Djawaran names. Yes, the wealth of First Nations name represented in the colonial literature might not be as strong in Djawaran country as it is in Jakarung or in Budaya, Yagujali country, but there's still plenty of recognised Indigenous names in our Shire that at the moment are unofficial place names. They're not in the register of Victorian place names. And I think we can do a lot in that space. And some people say, oh, that's just sort of symbolism. Well, maybe it is, but it's really important. Leanganuk is a powerful place name. And we can take some heart from what the Shire of Hepburn have done with Lani Barramore Creek, or Lani Barramore Banyul, was it? Lani Barramore Yallock.
Place of New Jersey.
Yes, and there's a lot that we can do in our Shire. Anyway, enough from me.
We're good? Excellent. A big round of applause, please, for our candidates. I've said no from the floor, but I don't think I can say no to Kath Koff, so special rules.
No, it's not special rules. I know it's not fair and equitable, and it hasn't been for a long time. Kerrie Allen is the first Aboriginal person in this Shire for over 230 years that has gone and stood up for council. 230 years. And last year, she's still up here, and I need to say, 230 years, she's the first Aboriginal person that has stood for council. And why on earth is she not standing unopposed? There needs to be changes to the white way of being. If she's the first person who have actually stood up and said, done this in 230 years, why this is after last year, the impacts for all mob last year. And then really I just need you guys to be aware, if this is something that this council is going to allow for this year, for the first time, and for that to be something that should be questioned, when we're talking about fairness and equity, we had our levels of racism after last year. The kids in the school schools in this Shire, all mob, nearly, we're possibly under 20% of attendance. So I really love what you said, because it hasn't been very equitable for a long time. So it's actually up to you guys to make a difference and vote with your feet. Thank you.
Can we chat in the foyer? Is that all right?
No, 60 seconds, please.
I think we need to wrap up, Phillip. Sorry. All right. Thank you, Kath, for bringing truth into the room, which we started with and which we've finished with. And thanks everyone for turning out and joining us. No, I was just thinking it's good to just take, 10 seconds together and have a breath and process that. I'm sorry, I'm not going to keep passing the mic around, Phillip. Or Max. I know, but we can talk about it together afterwards. Yeah, thank you. But what I also want to acknowledge is that not every question was answered directly to the questions that the community organisations had, but each... Yes, and that there were many other questions that groups put in. So there was actually 13 groups and I think over 30 questions. So many of those will be answered at length on the website, which is Mount Alexander, meet the candidates, mountalexander.com.au, and will also be online and on social media. I just really want to thank everyone who put the time into those questions, and my job was to ask the questions. I didn't want to cut in and keep people on point, but as we said, there'll be written responses that are longer. Today we've had hands raised in commitment of Safe Space Castlemaine, My Home Network, had a commitment to doing anti-racism truth-telling work, a commitment to getting professional development on cultural awareness, a commitment to take the Rainbow Pledge, a commitment to look at cultural diversity inclusion in council, to update the refugee welcome zone, to look at releasing 1,000 houses to make them more available to rent, and to strengthening the relationship with First Nations people. So as I said, that's all been recorded. This was a job interview. If you get the job, we're holding you to account. Thank you to Castlemaine Commons, Castlemaine Community House, Pride, Safe Space, School Strike for Climate, Central Vic Climate Action, Free Palestine Central Vic, Mount Alexander Shire Accommodation and Respite Group, the Disability Advocacy Group, My Home Network, Rural Australians for Refugees, the young people of the Shire, everyone who put today on, the theatre, Tim, Felicity and Jim. Thank you to Mira for keeping us on track, to Laurie and Zoe and Rowan and Alex and Rachel and all the ushers, and Tina for all your work behind the scenes. There's 3 events coming up with really local where you can meet candidates in Colaban, Campbell's Creek and Calder. Bryn's here, there's flyers in the foyer. We do need to clear out to make space for the next event, but thank you so much everyone. Thanks a lot. Thank you.